Amit. Today, we have with us a dynamic leader who has adorned many hats and has a rich experience of over 20 years. Pleasure to have Ms. Ritu Lal, Senior Vice President and Head Institutional Relations at Amplus Solar. Welcome, Ritu.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be
Ritu,
here.
yes. Thank you so much, Ritu, for accepting our invite. Uh, Ritu, to start with, we would want to know that what are your views on the present and future of the solar industry in India?
I think, and without intending to pun, there is a very bright future for solar in India. And if you look at how the country has adopted solar, and we're growing at a very rapid pace. Now, I don't want to make comparisons with any other country or even, with our own targets. But I think our installed capacity has crossed 40 gigawatts. And, I think it has at least equaled, if not marginally surpassed, wind energy, which has been the mainstay before solar of India's renewable story. So we've done very well if I look at those numbers. We are a very large country. We have a potential for, beyond 300, 400, or even 500 gigawatts. So I think in the long run, we are going to be very, very heavily solarized and derive a lot of benefits from it.
Great, thanks, Ritu. And as it is, the government has a lot of ambitious plans towards solar with the kind of targets they've set. So, Ritu, as an organization, uh, what is the contribution of Amplus towards the industry?
So Amplus works primarily in the private sector. So until now, our client base has been institutions, corporates, industry, commercial establishments, educational institutions, right? Most of which are privately owned. And this has been the bulk of our business. And we have been energy providers or selling solar power as a service to these clients. So we own the asset, we do the maintenance, the entire investment is ours, and we sell them solar energy at a very, very competitive price where they get dual benefits. So they get green energy and they save versus whatever the grid tariff is. We have now started serving the residential segment as well. For many years, we tried to work out a method by offering solar power as a service, even for residential clients. But in the absence of regulatory support, payment insurance and guarantees, etc., that did not work out. So for the residential segment, we have specialized products that we sell with very, very comprehensive warranty. So while we don't own the assets, we take a lot of performance, we offer a lot of performance warranties to our clients. And we have innovative solutions that enable people to use solar. So a lot of the, resistance to solar in homes is, space is precious and you don't want to give up your space. So we have very beautiful solutions, pergola, gazebo kind of structures, which do not take your space away. So you have your own solar generation plant at home. Plus, in fact, your space utilization improves because, these are on terraces, balconies, and gardens. And we create a very nice space that you can sit in, use for whatever purpose you want, whether to just as a hangout spot, somewhere to relax, exercise, even hold a small, social gathering. So you increase your usable space at home and you're able to generate solar energy, which is green, and again in the residential segment, of course, also does give you savings. So I know the savings is a little different because residential tariffs tend to be lower than commercial and industrial tariffs. So the ROI is a little bit longer, but there is a definite investment case also for the home owners and residential market. So this is what we entirely have been doing so far. We've also been doing open access projects for those clients with a huge appetite for green energy, but unfortunately those who have rooftop limitations. So we've been doing open access where in states where the policy has permitted it. We may expand into other elements of solar as well going forward, in line with the countries as well as the organization's ambitions to increase our renewable footprint. We're looking at accessing electric mobility as a service. We're looking at integrating storage in both these aspects, in solar and with mobility. We're already doing a lot of last mile service, in the electricity, in the EV business for a lot of the e-tailers, right? So keeping that green. We're looking at integrating storage into on-site solar plants and offering energy efficiency. We're offering clients who have RE100 ambitions to find other ways through certificates, etc., to fulfill their green appetite. So that is really the vision of the organization.
Thanks, Ritu. Thanks for sharing that. So, Ritu, there's a question, which comes into mind, which is like, these days youngsters, they have a lot of uncertainty, they jump from one place to another. So, what are the best business practices adopted by Amplus to cultivate and retain talent?
Okay, so that is, a difficult question, because I think long term for many in the youth today means 2 years, right? And anything beyond, or maybe sometimes even 1 year. Having said that, jokes aside, Amplus is a very young organization. I think our average age is 20 something, right? What I think we do well is we have reduced hierarchy within the organization. So we are a large company today. We are a part of the Petronas group, but at our core, we continue to function with the spirit of a startup entrepreneurship, where talent is valued, where age is not what is defining you, where it's not your gray hair alone which earns you something. And we have absolutely very, very limited hierarchy in the workspace. Even physically, if you were to look at our office, it's an entire open office, and every desk is identical. So unlike, other open offices where managers have larger spaces, or they're all occupying, the window rooms and the corner areas, here every desk is identical. Everyone sits together. So even removing physical barriers goes a long way, right? Because if anybody needs to talk to you, you're right there, you're accessible. That's the very first step. And we value talent, we reward performance, we create a fun workspace. So, we've always ranked very well in the great places to work kind of surveys. And that goes a long way in retaining talent from the, organization culture point of view. The second thing, of course, is when, these youngsters who come in, when they see the kind of work which is happening, it's the kind of work people can take pride in. Right? When you see, okay, this organization stands for certain values, not just for its employees, but in terms of what we deliver. When we look at safety, when we look at quality, when we look at the technical excellence of what we are delivering, I think it helps build that sense of pride, right? And that is another thing which makes it sticky for people. And that's why, a lot of our key talent remains with us for a long time. Yes, of course, we, because of what we teach, we do become the poaching ground also. That's all right, that is a part and parcel of the game.
University of Solar.
Yeah, that happens because they say, okay, you're getting, you want someone with these abilities, get somebody from Amplus, So that happens.
No, but I understand, this is very well put across that there are no barriers there. People are allowed to put across their ideas, and they're valued for that as well. So it's pretty good. So probably all the youngsters who are looking forward to do something and to create something, they can always approach Amplus for that matters. So, Ritu, now coming, from we've heard that what Amplus does towards retaining talent. So let's also hear that what Amplus or what Ritu expects from the policymakers in India?
Oh, that's a long list. it's it's going to look like a child's list, for Christmas. But no, on a serious note, again, I think the possibilities for solar are enormous. And I believe that if the policy enabled it, we would easily get there. It becomes difficult, with the kind of concurrent structure of electricity in the country, right? And I understand that and I respect that completely. I am not even saying that everything needs to be centralized. But that makes the job tougher because you have to talk to multiple entities, like 20 plus entities in the country on policy, because each state will have their own policy. And what we recognized very early on, and one of the problems that distributed and rooftop solar in particular is facing today is that it's kind of getting left behind, right? And in our focus on the big picture, that 100, and we're going to make that 100 happen, seems to be what the government is thinking. We've lost track of the composition of that 100. That 100 was meant to be a 60-40, 60 utility and 40 from the rooftop segment. That is very hurtful, not because I work in the rooftop segment. I could easily work in the utility segment, So I choose to work in the rooftop space because I believe in the potentials of the rooftop space, and that mix is important. There is a huge inherent advantage in distributed generation. So I really wish policymakers would enable it. I'd like to say two things here. So I'll break it into two parts. One, what are the inherent advantages? And what can policymakers do? So why is the question, that I want to answer, and that why should policymakers look at it? So I'll tell you about the inherent advantages. Land is really expensive in our country, right? Very, very expensive compared to everything else. And land which is cheaper is not easily accessible or near the grid. So then your whole infrastructure cost of developing transmission distribution is becoming unviable. We set up rooftop on idle spaces, right? Roofs, metal roofs of factories, the sheds, terraces of hospitals and hotels, etc., of colleges. So this is all idle land with no other commercial use or no other agricultural use. So we don't take away any land from anyone. So this is idle spaces, most effectively utilized, right? Size is not an issue. Unlike wind energy, you can set up one single module of different sizes, right? Depending on your need. And you can, if your space permits, you can have 10 megawatts on one site or even more, depending on space and utilization, right?
Right.
So size is just not any limitation. It's extremely flexible, right? It works and seamlessly integrates with your grid. At the same time, it seamlessly integrates with alternate sources. If you're working with batteries, if you're working with DG, all of that technical integration is seamless. It is safe and secure. It does not damage your premises, right? Because of the distributed nature of generation, grid balancing is easier, right? If there is cloud cover. Cloud cover is not going to be all over at the same intensity. And because each generating unit is smaller, the imbalance is going to be smaller. Storage integration is not a problem at all. There are no added costs of transmission and distribution, right? There is an existing, for all on-grid systems, there is an existing T&D infrastructure, and we fit the solar plant to not disturb that T&D infrastructure. So cost of transmission, zero. It's so efficient. It's produced and consumed either at the same place, or even if it's net metered, it is going into the neighboring building. Mm-hmm. So there are no transmission losses. Efficiency is very, very high. Employability is very high. So there was one study which was done that said that in the rooftop, employability was 7 times that of the utility sector, right? When we talk of maintenance and cleaning, that is easier because you're not having to take tankers into the desert. Are we calculating the carbon footprint of doing that when we are generating green energy? Cleaning is much easier, simpler, and finally, the ecological footprint is better. We are all aware of the recent issues, and the Honorable Supreme Court is involved in what happens. Do we allow development of these renewable parks and their transmission lines, and its impact on one critically endangered bird, the Great Indian Bustard story that's been doing, the GIB case, which is dominating renewable headlines these days. So we are setting up on already existing buildings. So we're not, ecologically also there is less of an impact. So I think all this makes a great case. And honestly, I want to ask, I know we are saying that utility generation is happening at 2 rupees. Great. But is the average cost of supply coming down for transmission, for distribution companies? That is not happening. So you may be buying at 2 rupees 30 or whatever it is that you're buying that solar energy and other forms of energy. By the time you are supplying it to your clients, that cost of supply is above 6 rupees, 7, in many cases even above 8 rupees.
Right.
So the actual cost of supply is in the range of 6.5 to 8.5 rupees. And the actual cost of supply of rooftop generation is definitely less than that.
Indeed.
Right? Because while you have diseconomies of scale, because I'm not a gigawatt scale or a 500 megawatt, producer. I may be just a 50 kilowatt, or if I'm a home, I may be a 5 to 10 kilowatt producer. But even if I'm a home producer, I am sure I can generate electricity at less than 8 rupees a unit. Definitely less than.
Right? Right.
So if I look at, the cost of supply at the point where electricity is needed, rooftop works. And that is something which policymakers need to look at. We recognize why there are impediments. It's because, and that has nothing to do with rooftop generation, that's a very legacy issue of power tariff structuring in the country, right? And this is the same thing which is followed across states. So residences are supplied pretty much at cost. The farm segment, agricultural electricity, is heavily subsidized. And the cost, the financial cost of this subsidy is borne by the commercial and industrial clients. So what they call cross-subsidy surcharge, and then they have other surcharges, etc. So the industrial users who are actually, I think, who consume at least half the electricity of the country in terms of number of units, those are the people who are responsible for making good the losses on subsidies that the DISCOM has. Now, every unit of electricity that they lose to these C&I clients, these commercial and industrial clients, hits their subsidy recovery. It also hits their revenues because even the base tariff is highest for this level, for the C&I clients. Now, DISCOMs have been in distress before renewable energy came onto the scene.
Right.
Renewable energy is not the cause for DISCOM distress. Right? They have other legacy issues. They have the subsidy issue. They have issues with regards to transmission, technical issues and infrastructure, losses, theft, poor collections, and whatnot. But solar has come up at a time when they are already struggling with these other issues, especially rooftop solar. And it's an easy one to clamp down on, right? So from the DISCOM's perspective, these major issues that they have, in terms of loss on account of subsidized selling of electricity is not something they can do. The state has to intervene. It's really out of their hands, right? Upgradation of infrastructure, stopping thefts, etc. Again, a tougher thing to achieve, right? What is very simple is requesting the state government and policymakers to say, stop this proliferation of rooftop solar. And that is the language used. And at one event, and I've jokingly asked my DISCOM colleague, and I said, you talk about proliferation as if it's like a fungus which is growing. This is a positive proliferation which should be encouraged. Because eventually it does not matter that I work in a solar company and you work in a distribution company. We are breathing the same air, our children are breathing the same air.
True.
Eventually, everybody needs to work towards the same goal of cleaning up our energy production. And we have made several recommendations to the policymakers saying we understand that DISCOMs suffer a monetary loss because of the way policy is structured. But the solution does not lie in now completely blocking the proliferation of rooftop solar for large users, for those who have an appetite for using it. And there are many ways in which the savings from rooftop solar can be equitably shared between the rooftop owner, between developers where it's being done on a service model, and the distribution company, which goes beyond, and I know people say give them the RPO. Yes, please give them the RPO unless you yourself, the rooftop owner is an obligated entity who needs to have, renewable purchase. Give them that RPO, but share part of that savings equitably. Now, what you see policy after policy, the states coming out, if you tabulate the amount of charges per unit for rooftop is going up to 4.5, 5 rupees. That is not fair. But depending on the size of the plant, if you make good the losses that were coming from CSS in particular and the other subsidies and even, the taxes that the state is losing out in terms of electricity duty, everybody will make a saving. Yes, the savings of the rooftop owner will come down slightly, but they will continue to save. And for every unit of solar generated in their territory, the distribution company will actually save money. Because, and that's what we are trying to say. Let them buy that electricity at a fair price. So even if they buy it at close to their cost of supply, they will make the same revenue as they do from their traditional electricity sale. Because what is the difference today? You have your average cost of supply. And so tariff minus average cost of supply is your revenue. Buy rooftop solar at close to average cost of supply. You will make exactly the same revenue, right? So if you're doing a gross metering scheme, that feed-in tariff should be close to the average cost of supply. And then you can levy all of your cross-subsidy and other surcharges on it, right? So nobody loses out in this proposal. So we are trying to reach this. We're making some headway, but I think we have a long way to go.
Agreed.
Sorry, this one was a bit long.
No. That was very valid conversation, Ritu. But what you've just narrated right now. So don't you think that India being such a price-sensitive economy, so that will your proposition would impact the customer behavior as well?
We are price sensitive. So if you look at the customer as the rooftop owner, today a rooftop owner, depending on the size of the plant, can save up to they can have 50% savings over their electricity tariff, unit to unit.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they'll not, for most rooftop owners, they'll not be replacing 50% of their consumption, right? It averages around 15-20%. I'm talking of average numbers of their total energy is replaced by rooftop solar. Some of them, if those savings that they're making could be like 4 or 5 rupees a unit, sometimes maybe even higher. Some of them are saving 2 rupees a unit. Right? So that 2 might come down to a 1 rupee per unit saving, that 4 might drop down to a 2 rupee per saving, but it will still be a saving, right? So yes, I mean, you'd be saving less and that might dim your enthusiasm a little bit, but a lot of these institutions and these customers that we have, they're not driven purely by just the savings aspect of it. There is also the green energy aspect of it. So for them, that proposition that you're actually going green, and instead of having to pay something to go green and reduce your carbon footprint, you're getting a saving along with it.
So that means, it has to be put across in a nice manner to the people,
Yeah, the people are, I'm sure there is acceptance for that aspect of it. It is, I think, getting DISCOMs on board to understand that this method can work. That you don't have to just clamp down and react. That with every additional unit of solar generated in your territory, you can gain more money.
I hope the
Yeah,
Discom guys are
if
listening.
that happens, because what tends to happen today is they look at what should the feed-in tariff be, and they say, okay, it should be linked to the utility scale price discovered. It's not. And the many other. It's not just the economies of scale. There's several other factors that come in over there, right? A lot of those, those tariffs, they don't even have any of the import duties built into them. Whereas in the rooftop segment, we've been paying import duties. Whichever kind of duty has been there, if we've been importing, we've either been paying it or we've been buying more expensive domestic modules.
Right.
There are those aspects also that come in. Your generation is not optimum. You have azimuth losses, shading losses, other things which happen because of the angling of the slope, the heat losses, other things that So in any case, rooftop generation is not the same as a ground mount.
So Ritu,
But again,
that's a
point
long
I
list.
made,
that's a long list. I'm sure that's a long list which you
but
have
the
to
point I
discuss
made,
with
Amit,
the.
that
Yeah.
you look at it at say, okay, 1.992 rupees, 2.2, 2.4, whatever it is that you're
I
getting,
know
and
every day there's a record. Yeah.
there is that, uh, that's just at the point of injection of solar in the utility scale, right? That is one part of your total cost.
Right.
By the time that Discom comes to sell that electricity at the supply point, it's not 2 rupees, it's close to 7-8 rupees.
Right.
And they need to bear that in mind. Instead of, trying to force fit a tariff which is not viable. Gross metering has been there in most state policies. It's not succeeded because the tariff is not viable.
Right.
So if you want to make something succeed, you need to understand what will make it work.
True that. So I'm sure you've been discussing it with the authorities, with the renewable.
Yeah.
So there should be
Multiple
something which
levels
is
with
coming up.
regulators, with the ministry, with states. Yes. See, unfortunately, so far, people have always picked positions, right? This is my interest and that is somebody else's interest. But if you're going to behave in a way of, just your own vested interests, it's not going to work. And Amplus, very early on at Amplus, we recognize that, yes, the impact is far less than what is being thrown about, because, a 100 kilowatt plant technically is akin to about a 15 kilowatt 24-hour generator, right? So you're not losing 100 kilowatt hours, you're losing like 15 kilowatt hours. So while the magnitude of the problem is nothing, if you look at even 40 gigawatts is not even like 2-3% of electricity generated in the day. But we recognize that there is an issue, and we don't think it is fair also for Discoms to suffer. But I also don't think it's fair to be charged 5 rupees per unit for generation of electricity for grid support charges.
True that. So Ritu, I'm gonna cut you short on that because we're gonna take this thing again into our, when I invite you next, we're gonna discuss only onto the policy matters next time.
Sure.
But hereby, I would want to know what makes Amplus the best company to work for.